Welcome back to AP US History. We're looking at the growth of industry and unions in America. Why did America become the number one industrial power in the world? I think you can look at the fact that it had the natural resources, it had the necessary workers, railroads were constructed, inventions were created that aided in the production of steel and other commodities. You have a government policy that encourages business. There certainly were some casualties. The environment, workers, farmers who were bulldozed over by the big companies. People amassed great amounts of wealth during this time. Eventually, the government will respond by passing legislation to regulate big business and also to protect workers. The one thing that America has going for it is that it has given the franchise to the common workers, the common voters. One thing that politicians pay attention to is being reelected. And they can't ignore the vast number of workers in America and farmers who are electing them. And eventually, the rich, even though they have the money to buy off politicians, are going to come to heel. Now, the unions were created as a reaction to the abuses by big business. We looked at the Molly Maguires as martyrs. The National Labor Union, the first union to be created after the Civil War. Unions were not popular in America. They were looked down upon by society in most sectors. It was almost seen as un-American. It isn't going to be until the middle 20th century that unions really take a firm grip in American industry. The next union that comes along is the Knights of Labor, which probably will be asked on the AP exam. After the National Labor Union was defunct, the Knights of Labor is created. Terence Powderly was the man who was instrumental in organizing this union. It was formed in secrecy in 1881 so that the employers would not fire people involved in this union, which they were in the habit of doing. Many of the members were Irish. They sought one big union, including blacks and women. So this is a situation where people who don't have power are allowed into the unions. And unions are a way to fight back against big business, because if they can stop production, then the company doesn't make any money. And then that forces them to come to the bargaining table and compromise with the unions. He did not believe in strikes, Terence Powderly. He believed it was more a social reform movement. He was pushing for the 8-hour workday and better working conditions. It was like the Three Musketeers, one for all and all for one. If one is injured, it concerns all the workers. He fought for things like equal pay for women, which was unheard of before this time. He did not like the use of violence. He wanted to negotiate with workers or the owners. Sought to replace the wage system with workers owning the factories. He hoped that eventually sort of a communist idea where the workers rise up and take over the factories and then they operate it themselves. So they were concerned more for social reform than wages and benefits, which is probably going to lead to their demise. As a result of the great upheaval or the strike that takes place in Chicago at the Haymarket bombing in 1886, the Knights of Labor are blamed for this. Is blamed on what they call the Red Scare, or these anarchists, these people coming from Europe. 8 policemen were killed and 60 wounded. 8 civilians are killed. Knights of Labor are blamed, and it will essentially destroy the Union. and it was overnight. They just lost all of its union members. Uh, and this is another union that goes by the way. This shows a picture of the Haymarket riot in 1886. McCormick Harvesting Machine Company. They were striking against unfair labor practices and violent erupts. The first permanent unions, the first permanent union in the United States, which is still in existence today, is the AFL, the American Federation of Labor. And this was created in 1886 from the ashes of the Knights of Labor. Samuel Gompers was the organizer, president of this union. Represented only skilled workers, did not represent blacks or women. They were excluded from this group. Called for a closed shop, that is, only union men could be hired by the employers. Focused on bread and butter issues like wages and working conditions. And it will cater to skilled workers, and it will represent workers at the national level. It will petition Congress for help. It maintained a national strike fund. Evangelized the cause of unionism, that is, that it was good for America, and it represented craft unions, those people with skilled, not unskilled workers. Mediated disputes between management and labor, and again pushed for the closed shop. Only union workers could belong or be hired by the employers. One notable strike that you may have to know is the Homestead Strike of 1862. Carnegie was a ruthless businessman. He intended to break the union's back in Pittsburgh. He ordered his general manager, Frisk, to hire 300 Pinkertons to break the strike. They failed, and several detectives were killed. Eventually, the governor of Pennsylvania will call out 8,000 militia or National Guard, and they will stop the violence. From this point on, the union is broken. And those who go back take a tremendous cut in pay to work for Carnegie. Carnegie always maintained that he never intended for people to be killed or to destroy the union, but this is, the historians will bear this out, that this is what he was his original intention. He was away in Europe at the time, but he was in constant communication with Frisk, his plant manager. And the union, the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, are going to be broken. And this is going to be a serious blow to union organization in America. The Pullman strike in 1894, Eugene Debs got railroad workers to go on strike. It paralyzed rail traffic in Chicago. President Cleveland at the time broke the strike by ordering troops. He said if it takes the entire Army and Navy to deliver a postcard in Chicago, that card will be delivered, and so essentially broke the back of the Union in Chicago. The Union is destroyed. Again, this is another blow to unions in America. Eugene Debs was a socialist and at one time was jailed, and he was still running for the President of the United States, and he received about 1 million votes. So we could have had a criminal in the White House. Well, perhaps there are criminals there now already. The Pullman strike of 1886 was broken by then President Cleveland. This shows some of the carnage left over from the strike. So the government will stop this. And Eugene Debs, a socialist, fights back the only way he knows how, and he's trying to protect the rights of workers. He forms the IWW, the International Workers of the World, sometimes called the Wobblies. Some employers call them the I Won't Work crowd. Big Bill Hayward was part of the IWW, and they will use violence to justify fighting back at the rich corporate owners. Here's some of their cards that they carried. The hand that rules the world one big union. The formula to fight big business, unions, violent strikes, socialism, immigrants, anarchists. Well, certainly part of that certainly is going to work um, to stop the abuses of big business. This cartoon here essentially is condemning unions. Union membership, you can see that it by the 1920s had grown in the number of people belonging to the union, but it's not really going to be until the night after World War II that unions take off. There were songs that they sang to uh, achieve solidarity. Certainly, you can see here that the workers were united. And we'll stop.